It started with the wood splinters on the porch. It was a new apartment in a new town, the aftermath of a death in the family, followed by a rough breakup. I suspected I was already paying over the odds to stay there, so naturally, learning that the place mightn't be structurally sound left me less than impressed. I called the landlord immediately, asking him if he could send a maintenance guy out to check for necessary repairs. But when I told him about the wood splinters I'd found, the line went quiet. When he finally spoke again, he made some excuse about being busy and offered to call me back later. Only he didn't, and I couldn't get him to answer my calls. Frustrated, I went downstairs to the apartment below my own and knocked on the door. The tenant was an elderly lady, clear plastic oxygen tubes running from her nostrils to a pressurised tank she held by her side. She was pleasant at first, greeting me with a warm smile, but when I mentioned the wood splinters I'd found on the porch, her demeanour changed before she invited me inside. I accepted her offer of hot tea, sipping it as she began to relate a story. I expected it to be one of how frugal our landlord could be, but it was something much, much different. You know that big old manor house just outside of town? It's been derelict for almost a century now, but it used to be owned by the Croft family. I'd heard of the Crofts. They used to be the wealthiest family in town, having owned a series of fisheries along the New England coast. The Crofts had a servant girl, a Romanian gypsy, who had lost her family when their boat sank on their passage to America. History has forgotten her name, but not her beauty. And it's said the family patriarch, Howard Croft, developed something of an obsession with her. The two began a secretive love affair, one that ended abruptly when the servant girl revealed that she was pregnant with Howard's child. It was a disaster, an affront to the Puritan models of the old New England families. And so, Howard locked the girl away in the basement of the old manor house, keeping her under lock and key until she went into labour. When she finally did, she died during the birth. The child was murdered and buried in a tiny wooden coffin on the grounds of the Croft estate. It was a riveting tale, but I couldn't work out how it related to the splinters on the porch. The two bodies were laid side by side in the woods when they laid that child to rest. It wasn't alive, only it wasn't entirely dead either, the elderly woman explained. The child inside that tiny coffin kept growing, year after year, bigger and bigger, until the box was too small to contain it. Its arms and legs wrenched through the rotten wood, using them to dig itself from the earthen prison and drag itself back into the land of the living. Then, with its body and head still trapped inside the tiny coffin it had been buried in, it wreaked a terrible reprisal on the Croft family, unceasing in its revenge, until not a single Croft remained in this town. But why would it visit this place? What business could it possibly have here? I asked, having long neglected the porcelain teacup. The answer, the elderly woman replied, lies in an old photograph. Go over to that desk there. There should be a leather-bound album underneath. I did as she asked, flipping through the pages until I saw something that made my heart skip. It was a photograph labelled Howard P. Croft, 1899. He looked to be a young man, in his early 30s maybe, and although I'd never seen the image before, it was hauntingly familiar. The light blue eyes, the dark brown hair parted on one side. It was like looking into a mirror. Howard Croft was a mirror image of myself. I'd leave town if I were you. The elderly woman's gravelly voice sounded behind me. The Coffin man has already paid you a visit, and he won't give you another chance.